This is a review of individual artistry, the 2022 Code of Points. The main concept for the new artistic structure that has 10 points is that rhythmic gymnastics is defined by a unique composition built around a specific choice of music. And the choice of music, specific choice of music, is at the heart of the entire composition. The specific music guides the choices of all the movements. And all components of the composition are created in harmonious relationship with one another. So the types of throws and catches, the types and placement of body difficulties, of apparatus handling, of body movements, of dance steps, they all link back to the specific choice of music. Everybody now well knows all of the artistic components, and this will be a short summary review and 2 new practices on these components. And the concept of the artistic component by itself is that the judges work from a system of evaluation that can be applied to all gymnasts and eventually all groups. As we just said, and 2.2 reminds us, the music inspires the choreography by establishing the pace, theme of movements, and structure of the composition. It's not a background for body and apparatus elements. The music will guide how each component is created, developed, and performed. And this is how we develop variety in the competitions. From 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, when we have specific choices of music with specific types of movements, then we have a lot of interest because one exercise looks different from another. Character is the first component, and the Code of Points talks about character in the movements. Character means qualities that are distinctive. And the reason we included this is because distinctive means different than others. So the type of movements in the composition are distinctive for that music and that interpretation of the music, which would be different if other music was chosen in both the style of the body movements and also the way that the apparatus elements are created, because both the body and the apparatus help to create the character of movement. Quality of movement that is distinctive, specific uses of the body segments to create a style, just said, a particular way of doing something with high quality design. In the full presentation on STS, there are a lot of different examples where we can see distinctive styles of movements in all phases of the composition. For example, here we can see the movements of her hands and arms under the throw, the movements after she catches the ball, and then the movements after the body difficulty connecting into the next jump. Those have distinctive qualities or styles of movement that are specifically chosen for this music. Alleluia. Of course, those movements would be different if her music were different. And that is what the judge is looking for with character. One of the main points of emphasis in this component of character versus the component of rhythm is that character has to do with a theme or a style. Rhythm is also extremely important because the expectation of a rhythmic gymnastics routine is to make every element precisely correlate with an accent. And marking those accents is extremely important. It's its own component. And of course, it enhances and supports the character. But simply marking the rhythm with an arm movement without a particular distinctive style is not part of the character evaluation. It's part of working with the accents. So when we see movements here, which are very well correlated with the rhythm, we understand that this is part of the emphasis of the rhythm, that component, versus character. Losing myself in all the things you do, visions that we could rule the world, holding on for life. You got me losing all my innocence with every look. My heart's so vacant, a Holy Ghost. Oh baby, you bring out the devil inside me. These are all good examples. The stretching of the arm and these are all emphasis moments with the accents. And it's well done for sure. Because we see catch on the accent, throw on the accent, stretch the arm on the accent. This is great work with the rhythm. Small throw on a distinctive accent. But those arm stretches, the arm extending up in the same manner every time, isn't a distinctive theme of movement. Of course, this choice of music is based on accents. So the judge also has to be aware of what the choice of music is and what kind of theme would go with that. However, marking the rhythm and having some distinctive style of movement are different. So the voice included in the strong rhythmical accents offers the possibility perhaps of additional theme or character of music movement. So this is a good example of marking the rhythm. And the previous was an example where character of movement is incorporated. Movements without any particular quality that is interesting or distinctive lack character. Character is the component we're talking about. And this is important as a distinction between the two components, character and dance steps. Dance steps combinations are evaluated on their own specific merits. Therefore, they are not included in the evaluation of character of movement. They are separated because the dance steps, which was previously a difficulty component, were moved to the artistic component because the premise of dance steps is a character of movement, and it was a better fit in the artistic component. So when we speak about the component character, it is independent of the dance steps. They are two separate components. There is no penalty applied when the artistic component is entirely prioritized and fully realized throughout the entire composition. So when character is developed from the beginning to the end, there would be no penalty. And what do we have as the places? Again, we're not looking at the dance steps here, that's its own component. So we're looking at preparations before the difficulties, between difficulties, even during the difficulty. A lot of gymnasts who perform pivots or balances use the possibility of the foot position or the arm positions to create some stylistic, distinctive movement. Body waves, now there's a requirement for full body waves. Those can also be used to enhance the character. Connecting steps, under the throws as we saw, during actual catches, during the rotational elements. The use of different types of rotational elements at different places in the music, depending on the style of music, is really a high-level work with character. Fish flops versus chenets, walkovers versus seated lateral rolls. Those are all different varieties of rotational movements which can be linked to the type of music, the style of music, the moment in the music, versus just using chenet wherever and walkover wherever. Changing level. Gymnasts change levels a lot. Do they use this change in level to use the arms, the legs, the hips, the face? And connecting apparatus elements, emphasizing the rhythm and the character. So we have to remember, and we want to remember, that the apparatus also speaks to character. The apparatus also develops the character. How? When the music, specific choice of music. Again, each piece of music has specific moments in it. Are the types of apparatus elements chosen for all these specific pieces of music emphasizing that distinctive quality? Mills, spirals, rolls. Are they placed in the distinctive places in the music to create some sort of idea versus just here are spirals, here are snakes, here's an échappé, regardless of the specific moment in the music? So of course, if you have character prioritized from the beginning to the end, there is no penalty. And beginning to the end does not mean that every single preparation, every single difficulty, every exit from every difficulty, that's not the expectation. Every single one of these places for the full minute and 30 seconds. It does mean that all of these possibilities are prioritized in a variety of ways throughout the exercise, beginning, middle, and end. So a variety of options, waves, connecting steps, under the throws, changing levels, apparatus, a variety of this is used in the beginning, through the middle, and all the way to the end to develop some distinctive style of movement. And then we arrive at the penalties. We have 0, 3, 0, 5, and 1 point. And these penalties are for sure larger than in the previous cycle, which was the global wish in rhythmic gymnastics from all countries, from all continents, that this component have more weight. And the only way for this component to have more weight is for the penalties to be more significant and for the judges to take them, because the coaches work for the maximum score they can receive. 0, 3 indicates the majority of the exercise. This is a major change because it's a pretty big penalty even when the majority of the exercise has a distinctive style of character, of movement. So it's present, some style of movement or theme of movement or character of movement is present in most, but not all connections, missing during some, but not all difficulty elements. And then 0-5 is some parts. So there's some connections and maybe not a lot of difficulty elements. Maybe the difficulty elements are more prioritized. And that is the difference between these two. Now you can have 0 when the gymnast does prioritize character, and you can see it in all of those places explained in the previous slide, somehow throughout the composition. And 1 point is when the character is present only in the dance steps. So the dance steps could have fully realized character and style of movement and then nowhere else in the exercise. The rest of the exercise has just throws, catches, body difficulties without any of that connecting movement or under movement or during movement that is distinctive with the music. Or there are no real apparatus elements or movements which seem to have a specific match to specific places in the movement that enhance the character. That's 1 point. Majority, 3, parts, 5, and then none besides the dance steps for 1. Okay, then we go to the next component, which is dance steps combinations. And as we said just before, dance steps combinations are their own component. They are not connected to the character evaluation. Of course, they're based in character, but the point is, as we just mentioned, the world asked for more meaning in this component. So the dance steps have their own meaning and value, and the rest of the exercise also has its own meaning and value. And all of that should work together because the dance steps are really a highlight of the character. They're bringing to the forefront what the theme or style of movement is 2 times, and then it should be echoed and sprinkled and woven throughout the rest of the exercise. You can see here the text from the Code of Points about this dance steps combination, and what's important is a defined character in the movement, according also to the rhythm, tempo, and accents of the music. As you probably all know now, from having gone through the STS process, this presentation was made with some color effects because we weren't speaking to each other live. Dance steps are not 8 seconds of movements which only mark the rhythm. Steps, that would mean that the steps could be placed on any of the accents, right? Dance steps have a specific character of movement, and there are more examples developed throughout the full STS presentation, and the FIG also did a presentation last year specifically focused on dance steps, and judges are encouraged to look at both of those. The one last year on dance steps was done through the Academy. We know that they need a minimum of 8 seconds with apparatus in motion, movements expressing character, movements in harmony with the rhythm, and 2 modalities of traveling. And actually, there are definitely dance steps that are created without 2 modalities, sort of just walking or just hopping. They have to have two ways of moving, hopping, skipping, stepping, etc. So let's look here at these valid dance steps For character, style of movement, 8 seconds, apparatus in motion, and 2 modalities. And we have all of those. We saw the jump, that's the second modality. For sure, that's clear. The body and the apparatus are expressing a character and are moving with the rhythm. And now we'll look at this in terms of 8 seconds with character, this example. Okay, the reason that we chose this was because we have those kicks with the heel out, and that's sort of distinctive, but the first part of this step sequence has no defined character that comes forward. It's sort of the running with the asymmetrical movement. And therefore, these steps are not valid because for 8 seconds, we don't see a defined character. So the penalty would be 0.5 if this was one of the only 2 sets of dance steps in the exercise. Now, a lot of gymnasts and coaches choose to put apparatus difficulties in the dance steps, which is possible. There is nothing that prohibits it right now, as long as the presence of the apparatus difficulty element or elements don't interrupt the character. So they have to be created and performed in a way that supports the distinctive style of movement. It's definitely possible. Small throws with the clubs, mills with the clubs, rolls. Everything is possible if it's done in a way that supports a distinctive style of movement with the music. Now we'll look at this example. She has several apparatus difficulties, and we'll see if they work with the accents and work with character. And they do, right? So the first element, right? She catches on that accent and keeps the character going, especially the turn and then exiting. The second element, the preparation and exit from the roll, she's able to keep the character, right? The roll matches the musical move accent, right? If the entry and the exit into the apparatus difficulty does not maintain the theme of the movement, it would be an interruption. And then the preparation for the third throw maintains character, right? The arm movements. And then we get to 8 seconds even before the catch. If the DA elements are not part of the dance steps and they don't work like the previous example, they don't respect the character and the rhythm, then the dance steps are not valid due to not fulfilling the definition at 4.1 and 4.3.2. So that is one way that the dance steps wouldn't be valid. There isn't character for 8 seconds, or there's DA elements which interrupt the character. The steps are also not valid if there's less than 8 seconds. And here is a good example. When the preparation for the difficulty after the dance steps, the preparation for that difficulty is the final 2 seconds or the final second of the dance steps, which is the case here. So she starts into the preparation at 7. It's short. And here, we don't have 8 seconds, and we don't have character for 8 seconds, and so that would be another reason, both not 8 seconds and not character for 8 seconds, that they wouldn't be valid. Now, who knows, maybe these were never intended to be a dance steps combination, but this is a good example of movements, sort of the running movement, without any real emphasis, without any real character. What is the music there? What is the running there? If it's building intensity, then the movements would have to have a more distinctive style for that. So those dance steps, if they are dance steps, are not valid for those reasons. So again, the first 2 components are all built around character, and they're different from each other. One is the entire exercise, and the other is 2 times these 8-second highlights of why you chose this music, why you chose this particular music. The Code of Points requires 2 dance steps combinations. Missing 1 is 0.5, and missing 2 is 1 point. Of course, compositions could have 3 dance step combinations, which would be fantastic. The judge must watch the full exercise to evaluate. So if she did 3 dance steps and you only found 2 that were valid, that's also fantastic. You don't have a penalty. Our third component is body expression, and again, you can hopefully see in the building of the artistry component as a one big entity how all of these really do ultimately build on each other. They work together at the end to create the composition. This is its own category, but of course it's related to character because it's the ability of the body to express the character of the movements through beauty, through power, powerful movements, strength, and elegance. This type of union. These penalties are also increased, and again, the world asked for more meaning from the artistry component, and that means that the penalties have to be stronger and that the judges have to take them in order for this component to have the meaning which everyone wanted, and to not take them when it is not warranted. So this component was adjusted a little bit in the explanation. A penalty of 0.3 means that the body and facial expression is underdeveloped. So if you remember in the full presentation, a fixed facial expression without adaptation of intensity or character, meaning the sort of a fixed presentation of the face from the beginning to the end that doesn't fluctuate with the fluctuations of the music. Of course, it's difficult if the music has no fluctuation, and that's another issue. And or partial participation of body segments in the movements. Now, some gymnasts really do develop the body segments and the movements of the body segments. And they do have adaptation, the intensity of their facial expression throughout. Then they would not have a penalty. So 0.3 is when it's underdeveloped. And then 0-5 means not developed in the exercise. There's no facial expression and or insufficient participation of the body's segments. So the underdeveloped means the gymnast only has some expressive or energetic connection to the music. One of our TC colleagues had a perfect summary when we went through countless hours of routine review, and that is when the music itself is more intense or more powerful than the movements with the segments in some of the places. When the music is more powerful than the movement, that's when the expression is underdeveloped. For 0-5, so this penalty doesn't mean that there's zero expression or zero body segments. No, and we're not even at that point in rhythmic gymnastics. The level of the world is so much increased across every continent. We don't have the situation where we have zero work with zero segments, but really rather that there really isn't an energetic connection in the music. It's underdeveloped. So the expression is insufficient. The music is definitely more powerful or more intense than the movements in the full exercise. Or the body segments emphasize accents without intensity that matches the music. So the body segments do work. They do mark the accents. They do have that movement and connection, but they don't match the intensity of the music level. And of course, comes down to, once again, the very first slide, the choice of the music. The choice of the music that matches what the gymnast can do. If she doesn't have so much power and intensity, then her music choice should be different. 0, 0-3, and 0-5. I kept this in for this summary review because we spent a lot of time talking about character and even expression, and it's the whole thing. Different characters have different styles, and their style has different meaning. This character and her dress and her body position and her facial expression is totally different than this character and her dress, her costume, her facial expression, her body position, or hers, and it's the same in an exercise. Okay, now we've arrived at the next component, dynamic change. And this is one of the, when the TC spent so much time reviewing, and even when countries wrote into the technical committee, because this was so collaborative, the preparation of this code of points, countries together with technical committee together with countries, talked about this aspect. It's a visible aspect that has an impact, it has an effect from the earliest decades of rhythmic gymnastics until right now. It's understandable and it moves the viewer, and it's a really important piece of the music, and therefore it's a really important aspect of the composition, right? The speed and intensity of the gymnast's movements, as well as the movements of her apparatus, should reflect changes or contrasts in the tempo and the dynamism of the music. A lack of contrast in tempo creates monotony, and basically it's not as interesting. So a lack of contrast in tempo is ultimately what the penalty is about here. Lacking contrast in tempo, intensity, or character. So let's look at the contrast here. Changes in the tempo and the music and intensity, and then how the body movements match that. This is intense music, intense elements, huge jumps, big throws, powerful movements. Then an immediate contrast in the end. The body stops. The emphasis is on the hoop turning with the accent as it slowed down, and the final movements are slow. This is a dynamic change. Now in this example, we're looking for contrast, how it's built. And again, its body and its apparatus. So in this particular case, it's included here because of the specific way that the use of the apparatus also reflects the building or shifting in intensity. The throws are used to mark subtle and big dynamic shifts in the intensity of the music. So almost in this sequence, each time the music has a shift, there's a throw. The beginning has a slower tempo, and then when the big shift happens, the big dynamic change in the music, the power increases, the gymnast performs a series of throws, and her intensity and pace, speed, tempo increase. Throw after throw after throw, 3 in a row, in contrast to the beginning. Those are also dynamic changes, and we want to be aware of that because we want to have the ability to watch any exercise and try to recognize these things and not just see this particular hoop routine from 2018 has 3. This particular hoop routine from 2017 has 1. It has to be that we recognize a system, where we see it in the music, how it's reflected in the movement.
Planet Earth, my home, my place, a capricious anomaly in the sea of space. Planet Earth, gentle and blue, with all my heart. I love
the intensity and style of movements well matched that of the music there.
What about rain? What about all that you said is yours and mine? I used to dream.
Starting to shift.
I used to glance beyond. Now I don't know where we are.
It's building.
Although I know
And shift. This is big intensity and huge throws. This is another way to create dynamic changes. And it's great. Contrast in the tempo and intensity of the movement in harmony with changes in the music, or created for very specific effect, including short strategic pauses, are present in the exercise. So we have kind of 2 different systems for using a pause. A pause could be used by the gymnast to change her speed or her tempo, slow it down or speed it up after the pause. Or it could be simply a pause to emphasize a moment and then continue at the same pace, and that would be an effect, which would be different. That would be emphasizing a moment in the music merely for the point of emphasis, but without changing tempo or intensity. Later on, that's effect. If she pauses for the purpose of changing her tempo, this is a dynamic change also. Here the movements are fast and slowed it down. And it's a great example because see how she speeds up after. So this pause or this kind of, not full pause, shift was a moment of total contrast, perfectly timed with the music, and then she speeds up again. So that's a great dynamic change. And of course, a dynamic change always creates an effect. But that's why it's its own category, not in effect. So what are the penalties if there aren't, if she has 2 dynamic changes, 2 or more, even better, 0 penalty. Less than 2, so for example, only 1 dynamic change, 0.3, and 0.5 is no dynamic changes. Which is a perfect segue into effects, because we just talked about it. So we have dynamic change if when she's creates a moment of contrast. Tempo, intensity, character. And then we have this new component, effect, right? It's a new component, and it's just further encouraging coaches to consider which element is coordinated with which accent. And this is a response to how far we came from this in the end of the last cycle, when the dramatic interest in the highest number of difficulties vastly outweighed the interest in which element went with which musical accent, and we moved away from that distinctive, thoughtful, artistic relevance of music and movement. And therefore, again, the whole world asked that this be more valued, and this is a new request that for one moment, for one accent, for one moment in the exercise, the apparatus and or body movement has a specific coordination, which is distinctive, which is memorable. Of course, the entire exercise, everything should be well coordinated. All right? The gymnast should perform the apparatus and body elements on the accents. This isn't special. This is what rhythmic gymnastics is. But an effect is one step beyond coordinating with the. It's like an original relationship between a specific piece of the point of the music and a specific movement. This says group, should be individual. And here we'll look at the iconic effect, which helped to inspire the way that we wrote this chapter from this cycle. The dinging of the bell and the rebound of the ball off the foot. This specific rebound is a specific highlight of this moment in the music. So the code of points offers possible ways to create effects. They're listed in 7.1.2. Of course, these are just possibilities. It's not the only option to create an effect. That's unlimited. That's imagination, creativity. These are just suggestions, and they're at 7.1.2. For example, we have here a unique element on an interesting or accent, it says accent or phrase, of the music to have maximum impact to highlight the relationship of music and movement. This is a super unique element and a huge sort of highlighted accent in the music. Compositions without a body and or apparatus effect with the music will be penalized, and the penalty is 0.3. No specific body and or apparatus element coordinated with specific accent or phrases. If there is one effect, there is 0 penalty in this component. And again, if you refresh the text of the Code of Points and the fully developed presentation in STS, it's possible for this to be a simple element. It's possible for it to be a complex element. The important thing is the highlight of some element, some movement with a specific accent that really brings attention to it, highlights it. highlighting the music through the apparatus, highlighting the apparatus or body element through the music. Variety of the throws and the catches you saw in the presentation, and you know more than 3 identical throws and or catches. And of course, in the previous code of points, there was a lot more possibility for repeating the same groups of rotations. So that was even more possible to do all these different forms of back walkovers. But you saw more than 3 identical catches of the club into the back walkover. Use of space. So this penalty was really sort of condensed into the most visible for the judge and at the same time the most relevant for composition when gymnasts simply don't go to one corner or the other at all in the exercise, meaning the exercise is performed only in part of the composition and as you remember, part of the floor area. And as you remember, in this example in STS, the front right corner is not used, and therefore the penalty is applied. Unity. Want to spend some time talking about unity and refreshing unity also because it's a new penalty. And this penalty, as you can see with the underlined text, not highlighted, underlined text here, 1 or several severe technical faults. So what's important? 1 or several severe technical faults, which break the unity of the composition by forcing the gymnast to halt the performance or stop portraying an artistic image. This one was very hard to write, and it was a collaborative effort between the technical committee and the judges who were invited to be part of the sort of testing process of the code of points before it was finalized. And the goal of this penalty was for the situation where there are severe faults, but in the past, if the difficulty so far outweighed those that the gymnast would still be able to have a very high score, even when she would have to break the exercise. So here, 1 or several severe technical faults, not a small fault, not a very small loss next to her where she doesn't have to stop her performance. She simply retrieves the apparatus and continues. That is not a unity penalty. It also specifically says technical, it does say technical fault, in judges have expressed some confusion in that what if there's no overall unified idea? But that is not this penalty, because that is addressed in character. This has to do with one or several faults which force her to stop her performance. If she doesn't really have to stop, or if she can keep going even after this mistake or fault, then there is no unity penalty. And actually, I pulled this additional example from the previous example in the dance steps, because you can see a minor technical fault here. So you saw at the very beginning, I'll show it again, this very small, minor technical fault, loss of the apparatus. Of course, execution takes the penalty, but she did not have to halt her performance at all. So the artistic judge doesn't take a unity penalty. In the same way that if she had this fault right here, this would not impact your evaluation of character either. This only impacts rhythm if she breaks the rhythm, and unity if she has to stop performing to retrieve it. It doesn't impact your decision on character, and it is not a unity penalty. She didn't have to stop performing. Connections. This is a penalty that was increased by the new code of points because of where we had arrived at the end of the previous cycle, where the gymnasts were doing so many difficulties with less regard to how they would transfer their positions from up to down, one side to another side. A connection is a link between the difficulties or the movements, and all movements must have a logical, intentional relationship between them, so that one movement passes into the next for an identifiable reason. Let's look here at these well-developed connections. They're intentional meaning they happen for a reason. She changes from one direction to another for a reason. They're logical and they're smooth. Let's watch the hoop planes. The hoop position and plane is smooth through the entire movement so far. Sometimes when the gymnasts prepare one element and then exit another element, the apparatus swings back and forth. It goes from one position to another position without that continuity. And that's the difference between well-developed connections and connections which receive a penalty. Of course, these links between the movements provide an opportunity to reinforce the character of the composition. Elements join smoothly and logically without prolonged preparations or unnecessary stops do not have a penalty. We want to watch when the body or apparatus changes directions, changes levels, or specifically the apparatus changes planes or directions. In the hoop example, you saw how smoothly the plane of the hoop was maintained, even though it was covering all different parts of her body. And we have from the text of the Code of Points, elements which are arranged together without a clear purpose become a series of unrelated actions. Those connections are difficulties linked without a clear relationship, or transitions from one movement or difficulty to another that are abrupt, illogical, or prolonged. Waiting, stopping, long time to set up. Illogical, we've already discussed, back and forth, up or down. Or abrupt, the same type of thing. You're standing up and then you just sit down because you need to be on the floor, not because you have some character to go down or some element that brings you down. You just need to go from point A to point B abruptly. Here we'll see an illogical change of direction. She'll be going one way and then she'll just turn and go the other. Here, she caught the hoop this way and then turned and walked the other way. And then actually again. 0, 1 each time. We'll watch here, after she catches the apparatus down, how she gets up and then sets up for the next difficulty. So she's down here and then stands up and walks here. Another important reminder is that a technical fault could interrupt the rhythm, and most of the time does, but not always, but it is not a connection penalty. A technical fault that happens when the connection is otherwise logical is not a connection penalty. Most of the time the faults can be a loss of the rhythm because the gymnast is not in harmony with the accents when she's recovering. But just dropping the apparatus is not a connection penalty. The connection penalty is how it's joined together. Sometimes after a loss, the loss itself is not a connection penalty. But the loss sometimes can lead to a connection penalty because as the gymnast recovers, she abruptly either changes her direction because now she's in the wrong place of the carpet, or she will abruptly put the apparatus where it should have been but isn't, and that could be a connection penalty. So that could lead to other consequences. So she's going to lose the ribbon. But the judge would not, for this loss, the judge would not automatically mark a connection on her form. Now maybe she does for the abrupt way that she stands up and turns around after it. That could be a connection fault. But it's not an automatic, just like right here, this loss of apparatus is not something that the judge is looking at in terms of character. And what about unity? We just talked about it, so I replayed it because it's an opportunity to talk about unity. She dropped it, but she was starting the backwards somersault, and she basically kept going and then stood up and kept going, so she didn't have to stop her performance due to this fault. She did lose her rhythm for about 1 count. So each component is distinctive. Illogical connections are penalized 0, 1 each time up to 2 points. That's an increase. Rhythm follows the same system. Rhythm we've been talking about throughout the entire summary presentation now. The movements of the gymnast as well as the apparatus must correlate precisely with the musical accents and the musical phrases. The gymnast should emphasize the tempo or the pace of the music. Apparatus movements showcase the accents and the rhythm. Here we'll watch the work of the clubs in relation to the accents. Let's watch the mills with this and all these small little movements that match the large throw. and this body element matching this music, well placed in the music. Another example, we'll watch the clubs also in terms of the accents. Where are the throws? Where are the mills with the music? Again. Small throw on this unique accent. There were so many unique things happening in this clip, it's impossible that I could speak through them all. So I hope people could understand. The mills with the music, even the asymmetric, which is a totally different stretching element of one club, on different music, different small throws, large throws, the unique rebound of the club, the tapping of the club, the small circles of the clubs. All of those different varieties of elements with the apparatus, the clubs, all on specific music that matches. That's rhythm, that's working with the rhythm and accents, and that's also related back up to the character. The idea. Rhythm follows the same system. Movements performed separately from the accents or disconnected from the tempo are penalized 0-1 each time. So when the gymnast is off, there's an accent and she's off. She's late. Her movement is behind. It's a large accent and her throw is after. There's distinctive movements and she's in the middle of something. All right? The judges have to have their own system to do these penalties. It is so much focus right now. And that's the only way to really make a difference, right? Because we want to move away from standard work. Certain gymnasts, some score. Certain countries, some score. This is the death of gymnastics. Each exercise according to this type of evaluation scale. And the judge having her own system, whether she marks here or she writes it on a separate paper, it would be very hard to accurately judge the artistic component right now by writing nothing down on the paper. And the judge should absolutely have something written down in case the president of the jury would like to invite and discuss whatever would need to be discussed in terms of differences. Something has to be registered on the paper in whichever system you have, so you're aware where you had an effect, where you wrote down dynamic change or not, how many rhythm penalties you had. You should know what the connections were. Writing nothing on the paper is not going to be a sufficient way to evaluate artistry. And now we return to the beginning of the artistic chapter. Now, hopefully, the beginning of the artistic chapter in the Code of Points makes more sense. When character of movements is prioritized, when the body segments participate with energy and intensity and match the music, when dynamic changes are emphasized, when they're visible, when they're beautiful, when the apparatus in the STS presentation, it's a ribbon exercise, which hopefully you rewatch. Showcases the accents through the pattern, the large throws, when the body showcases the accents and the character. Then artistic excellence is achieved. The composition, structure, and the artistic performance clearly and fully develop the components to create an idea or a story. That's what it means to create an idea or a story, when all of this works together from the beginning to the end. Hopefully, after STS and after this summary review, the beginning makes more sense of how this works together, even though they're evaluated as their own independent components. And now we have 2 new practices where we try to use the system and we try to apply the penalties. Of course, this summary presentation couldn't cover every single slide that's covered in the STS, but let's see how we can apply those here. Now we're going to think about how we approach this exercise. So, judges should check their form and we'll think together a little bit about how these components work together. This is music. Wait, let's start from the beginning like before. Choice of music. This choice of music is built around what? It's built around powerful accents, and the gymnast is well connected to the accents. The apparatus and body movements respect the accents and the phrases. Now, we think about the rest of the components, how they were developed in terms of this choice of music. There's a dynamic change along the back line, right? The speed and intensity is for the most part very similar throughout most of it. Even though the accents are emphasized, the speed and intensity is about the same. But along the back line, there is a contrast and a shift in both the style and the tempo. There is a loss of apparatus, and she does have to stop her performance to recover, then put the ball back, which ends up being a connection penalty because it's the abrupt placement of the ball. She does lose the rhythm there for about 2 counts, maybe even 3. For the most part, the rhythm is good. And this is a clear example where she finishes after the exercise, after the music. In terms of character of movement, she does have some poses, but she does have sort of the same pose 3 times. So there's not so much variety in that sense. She has poses. She has a movement under one of the throws, which is appreciated in the beginning. She has some apparatus movements, which definitely nicely match the type of accents. The handling in the beginning, the throw, the catch, the rolls. She has some of all of that, and that's the penalty for some. She does have development in the segments and sometimes on the face. Not totally developed, underdeveloped with the face. And therefore, we arrive here. And now let's watch one more and try to think also about the line system and where we end up.
Recuérdame cuando duermes y adivino lo que sueñas. Cuando lejos de nuestra cama sean mías quien piensas. Recuérdame. Recuérdame cuando mires a los ojos del pasado. Cuando ya no amanezcan en tus brazos y que seas invisible para mí, para mí.
All right, now let's look at how this fits into our graphic. And now let's look here, character of movement. The penalty of 0-3 is for the majority of the exercise having a well-developed character, and this exercise does develop the character well in the majority of places. The movements of the body, the movements of the feeling of the movements, well matching the music. Perhaps slightly less variety in terms of the apparatus really connecting with parts of the music, but the majority is there. The dance steps, she has the dance steps from after the one pivot before the next. Those are registered as dance steps on the limit in terms of time, but making it at 8 seconds. With character, there is no penalty for body and facial expression. Hoping that's clear for judges that that is well developed throughout the exercise. 2 dynamic changes are accepted. One of them after the side inclination balance, when the intensity builds up and she moves into the large throw with the turning jump and is also visibly building her energy and intensity through that element, even though afterwards there's a trajectory fault. And then the very end, where she visibly changes her tempo, slows it down, and ends with the music change. The exercise is well connected, especially the movement of the ribbon, 1 or 2 places with a prolonged preparation. And then rhythm the trajectories and where she loses her pace with the accents, those are the only real penalties that are there. Hopefully that is helpful. 2 more examples to look at. One more time passing through the components and wishing everybody good luck and lots of enjoyment in getting the opportunity to evaluate this component in competition, because it's the heart and soul of what makes our sport distinctive and different than all the rest. Thank you very much.